This video will be about the topic of what the state or government thinks about some certain companies or industries, and we have some idea of what the state is thinking about companies. If we look at some of the government-closed or government-owned newspapers, one of them is People's Daily or Renminwang in Chinese, and I've got a positive article for NIO that I can show you, as well as a negative or somewhat disturbing article on TIGR and FUTU, the online brokers, today. And so I'm going to talk through these articles quickly and give you my 10 cents around this. And by the way, if I sound or look a little bit different, that's due to the fact that I caught a little cold here. But anyways, let's jump into this article around NIO, which is around the topic of that new energy vehicles or smart cars are going overseas. And this article, which once again is by Renminwang, is mentioning NIO specifically here, the Waylai ES8 going to Norway and being introduced to European customers. So the topic is all about how cars are getting smarter, new technology upgrades, and how Chinese companies are actually really well positioned to catch this trend. They specifically mention how Chinese companies like Waylai, so that's NIO, have seized the opportunity to use battery swapping technology, cloud-based vehicle functionalities, and so on. I mentioned many more different technologies that are now new in this game and which are welcomed on a global stage and also make a difference to Chinese cars going overseas in the past when they failed to accomplish crash tests successfully and so on. And now everything has changed, and the area of 5G connected cars and so on are presenting a new opportunity for the Chinese manufacturers going global. And so this entire article is quite positive. It's mentioning NIO specifically, and it talks about some stuff that I've also mentioned here on the channel, how NIO can help to change the perceptions around Chinese goods, that they become more qualitative as well as more technologically advanced. And that seems to resonate with the overall strategy of the country. That seems to be also positive in the light of what the government is planning in China. And so that's why they get this article in. Not a great piece of journalism in my point of view. There's nothing new or groundbreaking in this article. It's more like a commentary, and it's more like catching the mood and what is kind of the stance of the Chinese officials here, as well as from a population point of view on companies like NIO. Now let's jump straight to the next article, which is negative in a sense that it is talking about the implementation of the personal information protection law, which is imminent, and what should cross-border internet brokers do, specifically mentioning TIGR and FUTU holdings. By the way, this is automatically translated here. And of course, I am invested in TIGR brokers. I'm not invested in FUTU anymore. I mentioned that here on the channel before, that I sold out when I thought it is kind of overvalued. But just recently in this sell-off in TIGR, I have actually increased my position. And so, of course, it's also affecting me now that I see that the stock is down minus 10%, I think, pre-market on the news that this article has just been published. And this article is kind of talking about the personal information that is collected from users opening accounts. So during the opening account process, it's described how this is happening, and basically summarizing that those cross-border companies that are collecting personal information will have the challenge that they need to become compliant with the mainland Chinese local law, and thereby they're facing such kind of compliancy issues of this new personal information protection law that will go into place in the beginning of November. Now, TIGR and FUTU are facing the issue that TIGR and FUTU may be subject to new crackdown rules, and therefore the short float is quite high. So lots of short sellers are betting that the stock is going to lose value. Namely, I think Jim Chanos might be one of them based on this clip. And so the issue with this article, which is basically warming up some of these compliance issues that this company is going to face, is that this is coming from a legitimate source. Of course, People's Daily, as I mentioned before, also in the case of NIO, is close to what is the perception of the government. And thereby, if they say that these companies are possibly at stake in terms of not being compliant with the current regulations, then this is obviously a heavyweight news. Although I have to say that this article, as far as I was skimming it, is mainly kind of summarizing the situation of these two brokers and not specifically mentioning a new rule that is being set out there that would be targeting them. So I think the main message of this article is that these companies are in the focus of the regulators, or that the regulators do see or acknowledge that there are compliancy issues or possibly ways that user information is collected from mainland Chinese users and possibly stored overseas, or different problems with the privacy. And so it's no surprise that these companies need to get their processes straight in terms of being compliant with the personal information protection law that will regulate, for instance, cross-border data transfer, handling of personal information and sensitive personal information. And by the way, these regulations on financial institutions will not only be taken effect for TIGR and FUTU, but also to other even international firms like Schroders, Vanguard and HSBC, you name it. All of them need to do a risk evaluation and get straight away they collect personal financial data, and also how data may actually be transferred overseas. And some of these companies may actually be categorized as so-called CIIOs and face additional restrictions. So that means they would be classified critical information infrastructure operators, and thereby also need to have stricter rules on how the data is being stored. For instance, is it stored on mainland China servers? They need to have rules in place how to make sure that the data cannot be hacked or accessed from overseas and stuff like that. And if you're maybe familiar with quality management in companies like corporates and also ISO rules and regulations, these are the sort of processes that you need to have in place in the company. You need to prove and document that you're having them. And then there will be regulatory oversight in terms of seeing whether or not these companies are actually adhering to those rules and enforcing them. So that's kind of the context for TIGR and FUTU there. FUTU allegedly already came out today and said in the past they already implemented some similar rules and became compliant with them, and are now working on also getting those personal information rules straight until November. I think this is the most likely case, that the companies like FUTU and TIGR will look in the specifics of these rules and, for instance, change their sign-up process for Chinese mainland nationals who are affected by these rules, and create a sign-up process that is compliant, and then push it via an update of their software and apps, and thereby become compliant with the newest regulations. And so until such kind of a compliance is hopefully possible to be achieved and successful and documented, it makes sense that investors are more conservative on investing in those two companies, and that's why this drawdown is resulting here. However, there might be more to it. There might be more news coming out in the next couple of months. For example, regarding the network and encryption, personal information protection, cross-border data transfer, and maybe even the CIIO topic there. In the long run, is this an issue? No, in the case that they can become fully compliant, and then I think it would be a business as normal and they can just continue do what they are currently doing. However, there's additional risk in the case of FUTU and TIGR because the setup, how they are operating, is allowing mainland Chinese to open accounts and also invest in overseas assets, which is currently not provided by private companies anywhere else. And so they're kind of operating here in a gray area because they are overseas companies technically, and they are setting up these processes that allow mainland Chinese that are able to, for instance, convert Chinese currency renminbi into USD to buy overseas assets. And in case that becomes subject or focus of the regulators and saying, look, you are doing something here which we don't want you to do, that could really become a huge blow to FUTU and TIGR and could create additional scrutiny there. Currently, that's not part of what has been mentioned in this article so far, but this is definitely a threat which these two companies are facing. On the other hand, also on a positive side, and that's kind of my bet why I'm invested still in TIGR. Well, I invested in TIGR mainly because I thought that this one is having like a nicer valuation compared to FUTU right now, where I'm more confident that there is still upside. I also invested very early in TIGR, so for me this current drawdown isn't a major issue. But anyways, what I'm looking to achieve with the stock in the long-term future is to kind of surf the wave of the broadening out or the acceptance of the stock market in China in terms of more companies going to Hong Kong, where is the main business of TIGR. Also possibly a opening up of the domestic mainland Chinese stock markets, and maybe TIGR could be well positioned there to acquire a license also for mainland China, which they currently don't have because they are technically not offering services to mainland Chinese. And I mentioned before that maybe even this Evergrande saga could have a positive impact in terms of that Chinese are looking to diversify the way they are investing and going into different assets. And I also think in this case, TIGR may actually benefit from that in the very long run. And additionally, TIGR is, in my views, the more international company, at least from a European perspective, because personally I have a TIGR account where I can invest also. And for me, FUTU isn't accessible. I know in the US, FUTU is accessible, so there are different takes on which company is more international in a way. But you also need to see that the mainland business isn't the entirety of the business of TIGR Brokers there and FUTU. And so yes, summing it up, there is lots of danger and downside to both of the stocks. I always mentioned how TIGR is even the more risky and shady ones of those two in terms of that FUTU has the more proper management, connections to Tencent, which makes it very appear very high quality and stuff. For TIGR, it's a smaller company. There are some issues with the board and the directors. But on the other hand, as I pointed out, these companies are still quite early, kind of even a startup-like setup here. And I personally think that TIGR could have some long way to run if all of those regulatory issues are now working out in hopefully the right manner. But certainly this article today is coming from a source that should be taken with big consideration. It's a heavyweight article there. But as I mentioned before, those regulations are something to be expected in this area. And now it's about whether or not they can come compliant with all of these issues and whether or not there will be actually a shift from China to opening up more the capital markets and see it as an opportunity there. And then I think TIGR and FUTU may actually be much of the beneficiaries there. So let me know down in the comments what you think about all of these takes. And then thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one.